The warm, opulent lighting of Laley, an exclusive fine dining restaurant, cast a sophisticated glow over its polished marble floors and carefully curated decor. The restaurant's atmosphere exuded wealth and luxury, and every detail, from the crystal chandeliers to the sleek, designer furniture, reflected a level of affluence reserved only for the elite. For Victoria Harrington, Laley was a familiar haunt, a place she could visit to bask in her own sense of importance, surrounded by her similarly wealthy friends. Tonight was a special evening, a celebration of her recent success in securing a multi-million-dollar investment deal. Dressed in an expensive designer gown, Victoria adjusted the delicate lace sleeve on her shoulder, ensuring everything was flawless. Her blonde hair was styled into effortless waves, and her makeup was impeccable, a testament to the hours of careful preparation. She glanced around, a satisfied smile on her face, as she took in the admiration from a few onlookers who recognized her. Beside her, her friend Sarah leaned over, sharing in her excitement. "Isn't it wonderful here?" Sarah murmured, her voice barely above a whisper as she sipped her wine. "This place makes you feel like royalty." Victoria smirked, nodding. "Exactly. And look at the staff. So diligent, so ready to serve. I can't imagine working in a place like this. Not everyone can handle the elegance." She gave a dismissive laugh, her eyes lingering on a young black waitress who seemed to be in her early 20s. The waitress moved gracefully between tables, balancing multiple plates with practiced ease, her face a careful mask of professionalism. It was something about her, the determination in her eyes, the slight tilt of her head, that caught Victoria's attention. For a moment, she was intrigued, but she quickly brushed it off. She was here to enjoy herself, not to think about the lives of people who existed, in her view, only to serve her. The waitress approached their table, a polite smile in place, as she held her notepad ready. "Good evening, ladies. May I start you off with some drinks or an appetizer?" Her voice was calm and steady, showing no sign of intimidation, though it was clear from the look in her eyes that she recognized Victoria's disdainful gaze. Victoria leaned back, giving the young woman a scrutinizing look. "What do you recommend for someone with a refined palate?" she asked, her tone laced with condescension. Her friends exchanged amused glances, stifling laughter. The waitress, whose name tag read Jasmine, held her composure, her smile unwavering. "The lobster risotto is a popular choice, ma'am. It's prepared with fresh ingredients and pairs well with our vintage Sauvignon Blanc." "Ma'am." Victoria scoffed, pretending to be offended. "You make me sound old." She gave a mocking smile, enjoying the subtle discomfort on Jasmine's face. The young woman's eyes flickered momentarily, a spark of something defiant flashing before she quickly buried it beneath a professional mask. "I'm just being respectful, Mom," Jasmine replied evenly, though there was a subtle firmness in her tone. She wasn't one to be rattled easily, even in the face of such clear derision. Victoria laughed, a sharp sound that caused a few heads to turn. "Respectful? How quaint. Maybe instead of trying to impress us, you should focus on getting our order right." Her friends joined in the laughter, their eyes dancing with cruel amusement. "I didn't realize they let you wait tables without proper training." For a brief moment, a tense silence settled between them as Jasmine absorbed Victoria's words. Her expression was unreadable, her gaze steady, refusing to betray the sting she surely felt. Victoria basked in her moment of superiority, reveling in the satisfaction that came from putting someone in their place. As Jasmine turned to leave, Victoria couldn't help but feel a strange sense of triumph. She was certain that this young woman, with her poised but clearly strained demeanor, was trying hard not to lose her composure. Little did she know, however, that her night would soon take a turn she could never have anticipated. Victoria's table continued their conversation, but her attention drifted back to Jasmine as she worked through the bustling restaurant. Each time she glanced over, Jasmine was either serving another table, refilling glasses, or rushing to the kitchen. Despite the continuous rush, Jasmine's professionalism never wavered. There was something about her resilience that both irked and intrigued Victoria. She was used to people shrinking under her gaze, folding under her scrutiny. "What's got your attention, Vicky?" Sarah asked, nudging her playfully. Victoria gave a slight, dismissive wave. "Oh, just our little waitress here. Look at her, working so hard for what? A few dollars in tips." She snorted softly, her friend smirking in response. Some people just don't understand where they belong. Jasmine returned with their drinks, setting them down gently. Victoria watched her, waiting for the slightest mistake, the smallest slip-up, anything to confirm her preconceived notions. But Jasmine's movements were precise, and as she finished, she looked up, meeting Victoria's gaze directly. "Is there anything else I can get for you, ma'am?" Jasmine asked, her tone polite but her eyes carrying a quiet strength that surprised Victoria. Victoria leaned forward, feigning a thoughtful expression. "Actually, yes. Could you try to bring a little more grace to your service? We're paying for more than just food here." Jasmine's jaw tightened slightly, but her smile never faltered. "I'll do my best, ma'am." With a nod, she turned and walked away, her back straight, her steps measured. As the night wore on, Victoria's focus drifted back and forth between her friends and Jasmine. She was so absorbed in her little power game that she didn't notice the quiet man seated at the table behind her. Unbeknownst to Victoria, the man had been observing the entire exchange. His calm, thoughtful gaze shifted between Victoria and Jasmine, his expression unreadable, his demeanor calm yet commanding. It wasn't until Sarah leaned over and whispered, "Vicky, I think there's someone important sitting behind us," that Victoria finally noticed. She turned, her eyes widening as she recognized the man behind her. It was Marcus Blackwell, a renowned business tycoon, and a frequent donor to causes advocating for workplace equality and respect. He was known for his firm stance on dignity and respect for all, regardless of their background. Victoria's confidence faltered slightly. Marcus's gaze was fixed on her, and his expression, though controlled, carried a hint of disapproval that made her heart skip a beat. He had witnessed every word, every sneer, and every moment of condescension she had directed at Jasmine. In that moment, a chill ran down her spine, and the weight of her actions settled heavily on her. Victoria's heart raced as she turned back to her friends, struggling to maintain her composure. She was used to being the center of attention, admired for her wealth and influence. But this time, the gaze that rested on her was one of silent judgment, not admiration, and it came from a man whose opinion actually mattered. She stole a quick glance over her shoulder, confirming that Marcus Blackwell was still watching. His calm, penetrating eyes seemed to see through her carefully crafted facade. Sarah noticed Victoria's discomfort and leaned in. "Vicky, are you all right?" She whispered, genuine concern breaking through her usually playful tone. Victoria forced a smile, brushing it off with a wave of her hand. "I'm fine," she replied, though her voice lacked its usual edge. "I just didn't expect to see Mr. Blackwell here." She could feel her pulse quickening, the confidence that once defined her starting to unravel under the weight of Marcus's gaze. Trying to shift her focus, Victoria picked up her glass and took a sip, but the wine, which usually brought her a sense of calm, felt oddly bitter tonight. Her friends resumed their chatter, oblivious to the change in her demeanor. Yet Victoria couldn't stop glancing back at Marcus, hoping he would look away, hoping he hadn't heard the way she had belittled Jasmine. But Marcus Blackwell wasn't the kind of man who ignored things easily. As one of the city's most influential philanthropists, he was known for championing causes that promoted dignity and respect. His presence was commanding, not because of any overt display of wealth or power, but because he treated everyone with genuine respect. This was the very man whose approval Victoria had sought in her professional circles, the man she had wanted to impress for years. And now he had seen her at her worst. Victoria's mind raced. She replayed the exchange with Jasmine over and over, feeling a gnawing sense of shame that she wasn't accustomed to. How had she let her arrogance blind her to simple decency? For a moment, she considered going over to Marcus and explaining herself, but pride held her back. What could she even say that wouldn't sound like a hollow excuse? Meanwhile, Jasmine continued her work, moving from table to table with her head held high. Despite the mockery and subtle taunts from Victoria and her friends, she hadn't let it shake her. In fact, Jasmine's resolve only seemed to grow stronger with each task she completed. Victoria found herself watching Jasmine with a mix of envy and confusion. How could someone in Jasmine's position remain so composed, so dignified? An uncomfortable silence settled around their table as the tension grew. Sarah and the others exchanged puzzled glances, sensing that Victoria's mind was elsewhere. Finally, Sarah leaned in again, her tone soft but insistent. "Vicky, you're staring. What's going on?" Victoria shook herself out of her thoughts, putting on her usual mask of confidence. "Nothing," she lied, dismissing her friend's concern with a flick of her hand. "I just thought. Well, I thought that girl would be more grateful for this job. People like her don't usually get these kinds of opportunities after all." But even as the words left her lips, they felt hollow. She knew her statement was rooted in ignorance and prejudice, and for the first time, she felt a pang of guilt. Her entire life had been spent in privilege, shielded from the struggles that others, like Jasmine, faced daily. In her world, success was expected, and people who didn't belong were kept at a comfortable distance. As if sensing her internal conflict, Marcus Blackwell suddenly rose from his seat. Victoria's heart skipped a beat, her eyes widening as she watched him make his way toward the exit. Part of her felt relief, hoping he would leave without saying anything. But instead of heading straight for the door, he made a deliberate stop at Jasmine's station. The restaurant fell silent as Marcus approached her. Even the clinking of cutlery and murmuring of other patrons faded, all eyes turning toward the well-dressed man speaking quietly to the waitress. Jasmine looked up, her eyes widening slightly in surprise as she recognized him. She stood straighter, her professional demeanor unwavering even in the presence of such a high-profile guest. From where she sat, Victoria couldn't hear the words exchanged between Marcus and Jasmine, but she could see the respect in his body language, the way he looked directly at her as if she were an equal. Whatever he was saying, it made Jasmine's eyes soften, a gentle smile forming on her lips as she listened. The interaction was brief, but it was clear that Marcus was offering her more than just polite conversation. He was offering her respect, something Victoria had failed to do. As Marcus finished speaking, he nodded respectfully to Jasmine and turned back toward the exit. But before he left, he cast one last look at Victoria, a silent message that needed no words. His gaze was steady, unwavering, and filled with disappointment, a stark reminder of the difference between them. He didn't have to say anything to make his disapproval clear. The weight of his gaze said it all. Victoria's stomach twisted, her face flushing with embarrassment. Her friends were whispering now, casting glances between her and Marcus. They knew who he was, of course, and their admiration for him was evident. They were used to celebrating wealth and status, but Marcus Blackwell represented something deeper, something they couldn't ignore. And in that moment, Victoria realized that her reputation, the one she had built so carefully, had just taken a devastating blow. Unable to bear the shame any longer, Victoria pushed her chair back abruptly, startling her friends. "Excuse me," she murmured, avoiding their eyes as she stood and made her way toward the restroom, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. She could feel the stares of other patrons as she passed, whispers following her every step. Her confidence had shattered, leaving her exposed and vulnerable in a way she had never experienced. Once inside the restroom, she gripped the edge of the marble sink, her knuckles turning white as she fought to regain control. The opulent surroundings, once a source of pride, now felt suffocating. She took a shaky breath, staring at her reflection in the mirror, the carefully crafted image she had spent years building. But tonight, that image felt hollow, a flimsy facade that had crumbled under the weight of a single encounter. For the first time, she was forced to confront the reality of who she had become, a person who looked down on others, who used her privilege to demean and belittle. And for what? To feel superior, to maintain an illusion of importance. The questions swirled in her mind, each one chipping away at the person she thought she was. As she stood there, grappling with the weight of her actions, a soft knock sounded on the door. She turned, startled, to see Jasmine standing in the doorway, her expression calm but with a hint of compassion in her eyes. The same woman she had looked down upon, the same person she had belittled and mocked, now stood before her, offering a kindness that Victoria felt she didn't deserve. Victoria opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. The shame was too overwhelming, too raw. She wanted to apologize, to explain, but all she could manage was a shaky whisper. I didn't mean to." Jasmine held up a hand, stopping her gently. "It's okay," she said softly. "We all have moments we're not proud of." Her words, simple yet profound, struck Victoria like a blow. There was no bitterness in Jasmine's tone, no anger, only an understanding that made Victoria's heart ache. In that moment, she realized that true strength wasn't about wealth or power. It was about kindness, resilience, and the ability to rise above pettiness and judgment. "Thank you," Victoria managed, her voice barely audible. It was all she could say, a small, vulnerable admission of gratitude. Jasmine nodded, offering a faint smile before turning to leave, leaving Victoria alone with her thoughts. As the door closed behind her, Victoria felt something shift within her, a quiet resolve, a determination to become better, to shed the layers of arrogance and entitlement that had defined her for so long. She knew it wouldn't be easy. Changing years of ingrained habits and attitudes would be a struggle. But for the first time, she felt ready to take that step, to rebuild herself from the inside out. Victoria stood in the dimly lit restroom, still gripping the sink, her mind a swirl of emotions she had rarely allowed herself to feel. Shame, regret, and an unfamiliar sense of humility mingled together, making her heart pound and her thoughts race. Jasmine's simple words, "We all have moments we're not proud of," had pierced through her like an arrow. And the pain of that realization weighed heavily on her. She had come to the restaurant to celebrate her success and flaunt her wealth. Yet here she was, feeling utterly small and insignificant. For years, Victoria had believed that her success defined her worth. She had worked tirelessly, climbing the social ladder, accumulating wealth and influence. She surrounded herself with friends who echoed her values, people who shared her sense of entitlement. But now, for the first time, she questioned everything. The glitzy jewelry she wore, the designer dress hugging her figure, the status she clung to, all of it felt meaningless in the face of Jasmine's quiet dignity. As she gazed into the mirror, her own reflection seemed foreign to her. The carefully applied makeup, the perfectly styled hair, and the expensive clothes all looked like a disguise hiding a person she wasn't proud of. Victoria remembered how she had ridiculed Jasmine with her friends, how she had savored the laughter at the expense of the waitress, who, despite their cruelty, had shown her nothing but grace. Her stomach churned with regret. She took a deep, shaky breath, gathering herself. She knew she couldn't hide in the restroom forever, but facing the restaurant and her friends again felt daunting. They wouldn't understand what she was feeling. They never would. They would probably laugh it off, tell her she was overthinking, and remind her of her status. But something inside her had shifted, and she wasn't sure she could go back to being the person she was before. Determined to make things right, Victoria pushed open the restroom door and stepped back into the bustling restaurant. She scanned the room, spotting Jasmine busy serving another table with her usual professionalism and poise. The sight made her heart ache. She realized how much strength it must have taken for Jasmine to stand there, facing patrons who looked down on her, all while maintaining her calm and treating everyone with respect. As Victoria approached Jasmine, she caught sight of her friends glancing over with puzzled expressions. Sarah raised an eyebrow, but Victoria ignored them, focusing on the task at hand. When she was close enough, she cleared her throat, and Jasmine turned, surprised to see her standing there. "Jasmine," Victoria began, her voice low but steady. She felt exposed, vulnerable. Her usual air of superiority was gone, replaced by something softer, more genuine. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" Jasmine's brow furrowed slightly, but she nodded. "Of course, ma'am," she replied, maintaining her professionalism. Victoria winced at the word ma'am. She knew Jasmine was simply being respectful, but it only reminded her of how she had mocked her earlier. She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. I want to apologize," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "for how I treated you earlier. The things I said, they were cruel and unnecessary. I don't have any excuse. I was wrong." Jasmine's eyes softened, but she didn't interrupt. She simply listened, allowing Victoria to say what she needed to say. "I know an apology doesn't make up for how I treated you," Victoria continued, her gaze dropping to the floor. "But I want you to know that I regret it deeply. You didn't deserve any of that." For a moment, there was silence between them. Victoria braced herself for Jasmine's response, half expecting her to dismiss the apology or react with the resentment she would have been justified in feeling. But when she looked up, she saw only kindness in Jasmine's expression. "Thank you," Jasmine said quietly. "I appreciate your apology. It takes courage to admit when we're wrong." Victoria felt a wave of relief wash over her, but also something else. A sense of respect for this young woman who, despite the insults thrown at her, had the strength to forgive. Jasmine's response was a stark contrast to the bitterness Victoria was used to harboring in her own heart. As they stood there, an unexpected silence enveloping them, Marcus Blackwell approached from across the room. Victoria felt her heart skip a beat as he neared, his gaze focused intently on the two women. She hadn't expected him to witness her apology, but now that he had, a strange sense of validation stirred within her. "Is everything all right here?" Marcus asked, his voice calm yet commanding. He looked between Victoria and Jasmine, his expression unreadable. Victoria hesitated, unsure of how to respond. But Jasmine, ever composed, gave Marcus a reassuring nod. "Yes, Mr. Blackwell," she replied. "We were just having a conversation." He studied them for a moment before nodding, seeming to accept Jasmine's answer. His gaze lingered on Victoria, and she felt the weight of his silent assessment. But this time, instead of feeling judged, she felt seen. He wasn't looking at her with the disappointment from before, but with a hint of something that almost felt like respect. Marcus turned his attention back to Jasmine. "Thank you for your professionalism tonight, Jasmine," he said warmly. "You've shown a level of grace and kindness that is rare." Jasmine smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her face. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwell. It's my job, but I also believe in treating people with respect, no matter who they are." Her words struck Victoria deeply. They were simple, but they carried a weight that resonated within her. In that moment, she realized that Jasmine's strength didn't come from wealth or status, but from her character. It was something that couldn't be bought or faked. It was real, and it was powerful. Marcus turned to leave, but not before giving Victoria a final meaningful glance. "Have a good evening, Victoria," he said, his tone courteous but firm. She nodded, feeling the strange sense of closure as he walked away. As Marcus disappeared into the crowd, Victoria felt a surge of determination. She wasn't done making things right. She turned back to Jasmine, who was watching her with a curious expression. "Jasmine," Victoria began, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "I'd like to do something for you, not as an apology, but as a thank you for reminding me of what truly matters. Is there any way I could help you with your goals, your career? I'd like to offer whatever support I can." Jasmine looked taken aback, clearly not expecting this. She hesitated, considering Victoria's offer. "That's very kind of you," she replied slowly. But I don't want you to feel obligated to do anything. I'm doing fine on my own." "I know," Victoria said quickly. "But this isn't about obligation. Well, I'd like to help someone who deserves it. You have an incredible strength, Jasmine. I can see that now. And if there's any way I can assist you, even in a small way, I'd be honored." Jasmine studied her for a moment, as if trying to determine her sincerity. Finally, she nodded. "I've been saving up to go back to school," she admitted quietly. "I want to become a nurse someday. It's a dream I've had for a long time." Victoria's heart softened. Here was a woman who had faced hardship, yet still dreamed of a career dedicated to helping others. She felt humbled, knowing that someone like Jasmine had far more compassion and drive than she had ever known. "Then let me help," Victoria said firmly. "If you're comfortable with it, I'd like to cover your tuition. Consider it an investment in a future that I believe in." Jasmine's eyes widened in surprise, and for the first time, her composure faltered. Are you serious?" "Absolutely," Victoria replied, her voice steady. "I have the means, and I can't think of a better way to use it." A look of gratitude and disbelief washed over Jasmine's face. She took a deep breath, nodding slowly. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. This means so much to me." Victoria smiled, a genuine smile that came from a place of true humility and admiration. "You deserve it, Jasmine. And I'm grateful that you showed me what really matters tonight." They stood in silence for a moment, two women from vastly different worlds connected by an unexpected bond of mutual respect. Victoria knew she had a long journey ahead, one that required her to confront her own biases and privilege. But tonight, she had taken the first step, guided by the strength and kindness of a waitress who had taught her more about humanity than she had ever learned in her world of wealth. As she left the restaurant that evening, Victoria felt lighter, as if a burden had been lifted from her soul. She was no longer the person who walked in with arrogance and entitlement. She was someone new, someone willing to change, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly free. The next day, Victoria woke up with a clarity she hadn't felt in years. It was as if the veil of indifference and entitlement she had worn for so long had finally lifted, allowing her to see the world, and herself, with unfiltered honesty. She remembered Jasmine's stunned expression when she'd offered to help with her tuition, and it filled her with a sense of purpose. For the first time, Victoria felt that her wealth could be more than just a status symbol. It could be a tool for positive change. After a quick breakfast, she picked up her phone and called her financial advisor, Robert. As the phone rang, she thought back to her conversation with Jasmine and wondered how she could extend this newfound purpose beyond just helping one person. Jasmine had inspired her to reassess her values, and now, Victoria was ready to act. "Good morning, Victoria," Robert's voice greeted her warmly. "What can I do for you today?" "Good morning, Robert," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady despite the nervous excitement bubbling inside her. "I need some advice on setting up a scholarship fund. Something for people like Jasmine, young adults with dreams and ambitions, but who don't have the means to achieve them. I want this to be a serious, long-term commitment." There was a moment of silence on the other end, and Victoria could imagine Robert's surprise. He had known her for years, managing her investments and ensuring her financial interests were always well protected, but this request was unlike anything she had ever asked. "That's an incredible idea, Victoria," he finally replied, his voice full of respect. "Do you have a specific structure in mind, or would you like us to brainstorm some options?" "I'd love your input on that," she said. "But I'd like it to be focused on education and vocational training, programs that lead to meaningful careers, and I want it to be accessible to anyone who has the drive that lacks the resources, regardless of background." "Understood," Robert said, sounding genuinely enthusiastic. "We can certainly make this happen. I'll schedule a meeting with our charitable foundation specialist. We'll create something sustainable that reflects your vision." They discussed some preliminary details, and by the time she hung up, Victoria felt like she had taken the first real step towards becoming the person she wanted to be. Her heart swelled with a sense of fulfillment that her usual shopping sprees and social gatherings had never provided. She felt as though she was finally contributing something meaningful to the world. Later that afternoon, Victoria called the restaurant to check on Jasmine. She didn't want to overwhelm her with constant follow-ups, but she wanted to make sure Jasmine knew she was committed to helping her with her education. She spoke to Daniel, the owner, who assured her that Jasmine was doing well and was both grateful and a bit overwhelmed by the sudden change in her life. "Victoria, you've really made a difference here," Daniel said, his voice warm with admiration. "Jasmine's been more focused and motivated than ever. She even asked me if she could take on additional shifts, but I told her to start thinking about her future, not just her present." Victoria smiled, feeling a surge of pride for Jasmine. She could imagine Jasmine's determination, her refusal to take anything for granted. Victoria's admiration for her deepened, and she found herself wondering about Jasmine's journey, what she had overcome, what had shaped her into such a resilient, kind-hearted person. "Thank you, Daniel," she said softly. "And thank you for supporting her. It means a lot to me." As she hung up the phone, she glanced out the window, lost in thought. Her world had always been neatly contained within the boundaries of her wealth and privilege, but Jasmine had expanded those boundaries, showing her a side of life she had been willfully blind to. Now Victoria was determined to live differently. The following week, Victoria and Jasmine met at a small cafe near the university Jasmine hoped to attend. Victoria had arranged for a quiet corner where they could talk freely without any interruptions. When Jasmine walked in, wearing a simple dress and a hopeful smile, Victoria felt a rush of emotion. Here was a woman who had faced hardship, yet carried herself with a grace that Victoria could only aspire to. "Thank you for meeting me, Jasmine," Victoria said, standing up to greet her. "Of course," Jasmine replied, her voice warm. I wanted to say thank you again. I never expected any of this." "You don't need to thank me," Victoria replied, motioning for her to sit. "I should be the one thanking you. You've changed the way I see the world, Jasmine." Jasmine looked down, her cheeks coloring slightly. "I don't know about that, but it means a lot to hear you say it." They ordered coffee, and as they waited, Victoria began to explain her plans in more detail. She shared her idea for the scholarship fund and her vision of helping people who, like Jasmine, had dreams but lacked the resources to pursue them. Jasmine's eyes widened in surprise and admiration as she listened. That's incredible, Victoria," she said softly. "You don't know how much this will mean to people like me. People like you." Victoria repeated, tilting her head. "Jasmine, you're remarkable. You have strength, resilience, and compassion that I can only aspire to. You deserve every opportunity to succeed." Jasmine hesitated, then met Victoria's gaze, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you. I think this will help me believe in myself a little more." As they continued talking, Jasmine opened up about her dreams of becoming a nurse. She described how she had always wanted to help others, inspired by the care her own mother had received during a serious illness when Jasmine was younger. Her voice softened as she spoke of her mother, and Victoria could see the pain and love intertwined in her memories. "I want to make a difference," Jasmine said, her voice trembling slightly. "I want to give people the same compassion and care that helped my mother through her darkest days." Victoria's heart ached as she listened. Jasmine's dreams were rooted in kindness and empathy, qualities that transcended any superficial differences between them. She realized that Jasmine's vision was not just about success, but about serving others, and it inspired her to think more deeply about her own purpose. "Then let's make it happen," Victoria said, her voice firm with determination. "You'll start classes next semester, and I'll make sure you have everything you need. Tuition, books, supplies, whatever it takes." Jasmine's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back, a smile breaking through. "I don't know how to thank you, Victoria. This is more than I ever dreamed of." Victoria reached across the table, taking Jasmine's hand. "Just promise me you'll follow your dreams and help as many people as you can. That's all the thanks I need." Jasmine nodded, her smile widening as her resolve grew stronger. "I promise." They continued their conversation, laughing and sharing stories about their lives. Victoria found herself genuinely enjoying Jasmine's company, seeing her not as a waitress, but as a friend. Jasmine's humility, her kindness, and her strength reminded Victoria of what truly mattered, far beyond wealth and status. As they parted ways, Victoria watched Jasmine walk away, her heart filled with a sense of fulfillment she had never experienced before. She knew that this was only the beginning, not just for Jasmine but for herself as well. She had discovered a new purpose, one rooted in compassion and connection, and she was determined to live by it. When she returned home, Victoria opened her laptop and began drafting her plans for the scholarship fund. She envisioned it not just as a financial resource, but as a mentorship program, where she and others in her network could guide and support young people like Jasmine. As she typed, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that her life was finally aligning with something meaningful. This was the woman she wanted to be, someone who used her privilege not as a shield, but as a bridge, connecting her to others and creating opportunities where there were none. In that moment, Victoria knew that the road ahead would be different from anything she had ever imagined. But she welcomed the change, eager to embark on a journey of growth and purpose. And in her heart, she felt the steady warmth of Jasmine's friendship, guiding her forward with hope and humility. The months that followed were a whirlwind of new beginnings, challenges, and unexpected joys for both Victoria and Jasmine. The scholarship fund, named the Empowerment Foundation, quickly took shape, growing from a simple concept into a robust program that would benefit dozens of young adults from underprivileged backgrounds. Victoria poured her heart and resources into the foundation, meeting with her advisors and collaborating with local universities and vocational schools to ensure the program would make a meaningful impact. For Jasmine, life had taken on a new, almost surreal quality. She began her nursing program with a combination of excitement and nervousness, feeling both grateful and slightly overwhelmed by her sudden change in fortune. She kept her part-time job at the restaurant, partly out of loyalty to Daniel, and partly to stay connected to the roots she was so proud of. But now she balanced her shifts with rigorous study sessions, her textbooks and notebooks always within reach. Despite their busy schedules, Jasmine and Victoria met regularly. Sometimes they would catch up over coffee, discussing Jasmine's classes and the foundation's progress. Other times, they'd meet at the foundation's new office, where Jasmine volunteered whenever she had free time, helping organize applications and spreading word of the scholarships to other students in need. One crisp autumn evening, Victoria invited Jasmine over to her home for dinner. It was a modest gathering, just the two of them, but for Jasmine, it felt momentous. She had never been to Victoria's house before, and as she arrived, she couldn't help but marvel at the sprawling gardens and the beautiful architecture, the likes of which she had only seen in magazines. Victoria greeted her warmly at the door, guiding her through the elegant but inviting interior of her home. Jasmine couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at the way Victoria had chosen to decorate. Simple, tasteful, but with an undeniable air of sophistication. It was as if Victoria's home was a reflection of the woman she was becoming. Still wealthy, still powerful, but grounded in kindness and warmth. "Welcome, Jasmine," Victoria said, her eyes shining with genuine happiness. "I'm so glad you could make it." Jasmine smiled, her initial nervousness melting away. "Thank you for inviting me. I still can't believe all of this. It feels like a dream." They settled into the cozy dining room, where Victoria had prepared a simple yet delicious meal. As they ate, they shared stories of their pasts, their families, and their dreams for the future. Victoria listened intently as Jasmine talked about her classes, the challenges of studying to become a nurse, and the hope she carried with her every day, knowing she was on a path that would allow her to make a real difference in people's lives. In turn, Victoria opened up about her own life, revealing the pressures and emptiness she had once felt despite her wealth. She shared how meeting Jasmine had ignited a spark within her, helping her realize that true fulfillment lay not in luxury or social status, but in meaningful connections and in helping others. After dinner, they moved to the living room, where a warm fire crackled in the fireplace, casting a golden glow over the room. As they sat with cups of tea in hand, Jasmine grew thoughtful, her gaze fixed on the flames. "Victoria," she began softly, "I want you to know that you've changed my life in ways I never imagined. I used to think people like you, people with money and influence, were so far removed from people like me. I never thought someone like you would care, let alone understand." Victoria reached across the coffee table, placing a comforting hand over Jasmine's. "Jasmine, I owe you more than you know. You gave me the gift of perspective, of purpose. You reminded me of what's truly important in life, and you helped me find a path that I didn't even know I was searching for." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, each woman reflecting on the journey they had taken together. Finally, Jasmine spoke up again, her voice filled with quiet determination. "One day, I hope to do for someone else what you've done for me. I want to make a difference, to be that person who reaches out and lifts others up." Victoria smiled, a sense of pride swelling within her. "You will, Jasmine. I have no doubt. You already are that person, and I'll be here to support you every step of the way." In the weeks that followed, Jasmine continued to thrive in her studies, becoming one of the top students in her class. Her professors praised her dedication and compassion, often commenting on the unique way she connected with patients during her clinical rotations. She had a natural gift for easing people's fears, for making them feel seen and valued. It was a quality that set her apart, and one that she credited to the hardships she had endured and the kindness she had received along the way. Meanwhile, the Empowerment Foundation blossomed under Victoria's leadership. Word spread quickly, and soon, applications poured in from young adults across the city. Victoria worked tirelessly, vetting each application and organizing mentorship programs, internship opportunities, and partnerships with local businesses. Her social circle took notice, and several of her wealthy friends expressed interest in supporting her initiative, turning the foundation into a community-driven effort. One afternoon, Victoria received a phone call from the mayor's office. They wanted to honor her work with the foundation at an upcoming gala, recognizing her contributions to the city and the lives she had touched. It was an honor she had never anticipated, but one that filled her with pride, not for herself, but for the impact the foundation was having on people's lives. She immediately thought of Jasmine and knew she wanted her to be there. After all, this entire journey had started with Jasmine's resilience and kindness, qualities that had inspired Victoria to change. On the night of the gala, Victoria arrived at the venue, her heart racing with a mixture of excitement and nerves. She was dressed in an elegant gown, but this time, she felt no need for pretense or posturing. She was here not to flaunt her wealth, but to celebrate the work she was passionate about. Jasmine arrived shortly after, looking radiant in a simple dress that accentuated her natural beauty and strength. She spotted Victoria across the room and hurried over, her eyes shining with excitement. "Victoria, this is amazing," she exclaimed. "I can't believe I'm here with you, celebrating everything we've accomplished." Victoria pulled her into a warm embrace. "Jasmine, none of this would be possible without you. This foundation, this entire journey, it started with you." As the evening progressed, the mayor took the stage to deliver a speech about the foundation's impact on the community. He spoke about the lives that had been changed, the doors that had been opened, and the hope that had been restored for so many young people. Victoria listened with a sense of gratitude, knowing that she had found her true purpose. When it was her turn to speak, she stood at the podium, her gaze sweeping over the audience. Her voice was steady, filled with conviction as she shared the story of how one young waitress had inspired her to change her life and use her resources to uplift others. She glanced at Jasmine, who stood in the front row, her eyes brimming with pride. "This journey has taught me that kindness, resilience, and compassion are the true measures of wealth," Victoria said, her voice filled with emotion. "I am humbled and grateful to be part of something greater than myself, something that empowers others to reach their full potential." As she finished, the room erupted in applause, but Victoria's gaze remained fixed on Jasmine. In that moment, she knew that this was just the beginning. Together, they would continue to make a difference, to build a legacy of compassion and opportunity that would inspire generations to come. When the applause died down, Victoria stepped off the stage, and Jasmine rushed forward to embrace her. They held each other tightly, two women from different worlds, united by a shared purpose and a friendship that had changed them both forever. The gala ended with a sense of hope and celebration, but for Victoria and Jasmine, it marked the beginning of a new chapter. They left the venue that night, their hearts full, knowing that they would continue to walk this path together, spreading kindness and creating opportunities wherever they went. And as they looked towards the future, they knew that their lives, and the lives of those they touched, would never be the same.